Right, go on then, Maui. What is your ugly point?
Mine is probably the biggest splash on Twitter in the last 10 days or so. And I feel like the way that sides were taken on the DRILLAS substitution drama just tore this community apart in a way that
by the way, a team that didn't even qualify through an RMR, but as you said, you're tearing me apart. I think they just destroyed the whole community. It's mentally out.
I mean, it was great. I had to block so many people for making a joke tweet about it. You know, like because people were just like going at my throat because they associate me with Richard.
By the way, I hope people know as well that's not real. Whatever that stupid post said, there's no way Richard Lewis banned like 3,500 accounts. Hey, what level of industrial skill blocking device do you guys imagine he has? Like, there's no way. He might have blocked like 300. How many gets? It's not like 3,500. That almost made it funnier though. It made me laugh. I know. Yeah, it made the story better. You are right. It's true.
Like I blocked a dozen people. You know, like it's pretty.
Like, why do they make it seem like Richard Lewis is like his blocking device is like an anti-aircraft gun? He's like,
yeah,
I know. It's so absurd. I know.
Either way, I just want to. I think like this whole issue just needs a well-rounded take. So I'm gonna attempt to give one here on the fly. Like I just think like at the start to go through the Middle Eastern qualifier to make it through the Asia RMR is already like it's already a fun story. It's also kind of warping the rules a little bit of what's possible there. I mean, you had 2 Israeli players, you had Hadji who has a dual citizenship for Morocco and France, and then you have 2 European players. And then to identify that you could or to then figure out you could get a sub on your roster who is European and then just say, okay, we're cutting one of the guys that qualifies our team to even play that qualifier. That's a fault of Valve. Like, that's a fault of the rule set here more than I do think that it's a bit slimy to do that because it strips away the essence of what is at play here, which is that there are these essential, I know people hate this term, but I got to think of a better way to say this so it doesn't trigger people. Like, what is essentially an affirmative action tournament to go for, you know, the Asia RMR, like to basically it's you know, like I need a better way.
You do. Here's the problem. I even know what you mean. It makes sense. It's just, again, of all the terms, like, it's like in many ways the sort of climate in CS, the way it's changing is fine. You know what? I don't believe in climate change. You know what are you doing? Like, yeah, it's all good. We get it. He doesn't mean in that way, guys. He just means in CS. It's all good. It's all good.
But the thing is, like, I actually would stand up for the idea that these regions that have less opportunities, that can't actually punch up into the Valve rankings as easily, should be given some sort of, I guess, step ladder to get a little bit higher up, because I think it's important for the health of the game that these other the Americas region and the Asia region aren't necessarily given the same prize pool and the same tools to succeed as the European space right now. So so the fact that DRILLAS found a loophole to play with essentially like a 4-man European lineup in what is supposed to be an Asian qualifier and had a chance to take a spot away from the Asia region, which at this point, like, there's not a lot going for it. They don't have a lot of opportunities. They don't have a lot of ways to make prize money, which is an essential part of the Valve ranking system. Like, you need prize money to vault yourself into the higher, like the top 32 ranks of the Valve ranking system. And if there's not enough prize money, then it should just be those teams, because there's less to go around there. That's just how it is. So I think there's like two, like maybe 3 parts to this whole thing that I want to break down. One, Richard's point to me was just that he was disgusted by the loophole that was being invoked here, and he might have it out for Oni Pixel in a way.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna get into that
I just thought he fucks with that sort of core streamer anyway, does he?
Yeah, took a jab at Oni, whatever. I'm not gonna comment on that. I think Oni's okay for the scene, honestly. Beyond that, then 2, I think that there was probably always going to be a team that tried to exploit this, and so it's good that it's figured out now. Like, I'm glad that it's figured out now that we're seeing a demonstration in action. And I actually almost, in a way, because they figured this out through a loophole, I actually kind of think that it's good that they weren't rewarded for it directly by getting sticker money. And then 3
would also been a bigger drama if they'd actually qualified, right? The fact they didn't makes it not as big a deal, isn't it? You know, true.
Yeah, and I feel like, well, okay, those are the 2 main points. I don't even need to get into a third.
Go on, then. What do you think
you guys have to say?
Yeah, it's hard to add. I think it's hard to add more to it. Like, it is hard not to eventually say it probably is the fault of Valve for the loophole being available to begin with. It's I do kind of wonder, like, I think, was there like a real chance that the stickers would have just been like onus faced in?
Yeah,
it was
that's what
implied
they
that what
admitted,
it was going to be. Yeah, as far as I know. Yeah.
I guess that's not the most important part, but in a way that obviously would have been something that would have been triggering to probably a lot of people, because it would have felt like the loophole was just like, super self-indulgent. Here's just to run with it a little bit, something that is so interesting to me is that for DRILLAS having existed, like, for such a short time and just being like this, weird project that he's put on, like, in terms of just like the marketing and the reach of it, is just, in a way, it proves that actually streamer-owned teams might even be like more of a future than a lot of other things, like, because it's so wild, because
the joke is they should just run their own teams, just like they run the core stream, like that topic earlier, because in a way, like, they can generate interest that we can't get, right? Because you're right, if it wasn't only Pixel, no one would give a fuck about this line of bandits. No one would care. No one would care.
Yeah.
You're right.
And also because, unlike a lot of actual esports teams, Own actually has a business model that works. Like, so for him to just bring more attention to himself, he knows how to convert the attention into money, which a lot of esports teams don't. So in some bizarre way, it does highlight like a really interesting sort of other point. But I mean, I think in a way, if Owner put this team in the European RMR next time or something, I think it would still be, I think people still care about it just because of what it is. And so, I guess you could almost argue that the fact that they try to find a loophole, it would actually be like, it's actually great marketing in a way, just because of the drama that it creates. But yeah, I think
this all publicity is good to Anders.
Yeah, like, but it is like, people
no, for sure. By the way, you could even argue they've even done sort of a political tribal thing where it's like you've done a Gowler's like us against them. You've made it like, hey, we're rocking with Oni and leave him alone. You've done that shit. In a way, it's only helped his brand. By the way, he hasn't lost anything, of course. No.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. So I'm sure that this is something that's going to be looked at in the future. Okay. And listen, I'm sure as well for the next year, there are going to be some. This is going to be one of the wackiest things next year. It's going to be like, what happens in these situations when somebody's going to get kicked from a team?
Sure.
Like, but how, like all the Valve ranking points. What happens? How did they decay? What, like, there are just a million questions that so I'm sure it's not the last loophole that we're going to be seeing. No. By the way, I will also say that's why, in a weird way, Maui, I can sort of see why it would also trigger Richard. Because you have to understand, there's a world where if there's really a sticker, follow my logic, if there's a sticker in the game of Only Pixel's face, we might, even when we watch pro games, have to see Only Pixel's face. It could just be on someone's AK. So that's already intolerable if you're actually a boomer like us and you're not down with the kids. Also, secondly, I actually think this would make Anders laugh so hard. If he saw on this, I think, last episode of Hot Take Point Made, Kassad did probably my favourite boomer moment ever in esports, which is, when you haven't said a word out loud, like it often happens to people who don't speak English fluently. sometimes you've only ever read a word, and because you never said it out loud, you say it out loud, but you fuck up the pronunciation, so you sound silly, don't you? And you realise in the moment, oh shit, right? Because he'd obviously never said this. Kassad just goes, and who's this one pixel? And it's like, oh Christ, Kassad, it's only Pixel, for fuck's sake, bro. Like, you sound like the ultimate boomer there. Like, you sound like these bloody kids with a fucking mind Fortnite. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are you talking? So anyway, there's that. Which was amazing, though, I have to say, when he said that, mate. I almost thought for a second, is he trolling me, Maui? And then I realised it's Kassad. Kassad's always funny. He's always so real in that sense. It was just real. It was a real, that wasn't even like a scripted part. He really just think it's one pixel. Then secondly, I actually think you nailed it in a way, Maui. One of the biggest problems with this is, this doesn't even look plausible that it was like someone did it in good faith. It looks like you cynically did everything in bad faith. Like, first of all, I won't get into this because this would be a massive political thing itself. I think even the angle, because I know a lot of people, you'll probably saw this a lot yourself on social media and forums, a lot of people didn't even understand, how are they eligible to play? Like, when I look at these country flags, how can they play? Because one of the angles obviously was Hadji is listed in this sense as his dual citizenship with Morocco. Now, the problem there is, if you know the history of Counter-Strike, Hadji is associated with France. Now, again, I'm not going to get into a whole thing, but that makes people already feel like, oh, so you're using the second identity to get through the door now. So one, it already feels like you don't have a traditional, just a guy not from, like, remember in past teams, this guy, I don't know if he did, but this guy could have been on like a WASG French team, couldn't he, back in the day? I'm not sure if he ever was, I don't think so, but he could have, like, maybe he tried to qualify. So there's that angle, so he didn't even really have an actual Asian player. Then there's the whole secondary angle, which also could be its own thing, but I'll just throw it out there. I actually found it a bit bizarre. I was shocked to find, like, wait a minute. So, like,
how do they class Israeli players? Because if people don't know, Israel actually has a problem with that in sports in general. Like if you don't know in Europe, we just tend to count them as European. They get to play in European competitions. So that one I also was a bit bizarre. And like, so how does this work? And then I would just say this aspect. The last thing I would say goes like this. First of all, I think this reminds me of the Astralis drama with Cadian and Bro. People hate when they know you did a bad faith abuse of a substitute rule, because we all know a substitute is intended for the good faith that you actually did want to play that player, but he is unable to play, whether from a visa, travel, health. When someone knows you never ever planned on using him, you were just going to bench him and bring another guy, and that already feels like it's a bit slimy, you know what I mean? Hence why people didn't like the blast angle. But I'd also say this last part, I actually think it's weird, this rule even. I was thinking about this the other day. Maybe I'm the only person who's tried to, like a Greek philosopher, to go down to basic principles. I was thinking about this the other day. Why is there this weird loophole? Because, by the way, if you don't know, guys, the loophole's always existed. It's why famously people said you should just buy, fucking whatever, like an Australian player, a person from South America, and then make a European team, because you'd have you could just pick the RMR, cynically, the cheapest. What I don't get is this. So the logic goes like this, guys. The logic goes, because you don't have 3 players, a majority from a region, this is the part I don't get. You can pick any region. Why put the second part in? Why put the... Because here's the problem, right? You're going to think, Thorin, what? You can't control how people make rosters. No, but this will only ever happen to abuse it, because you're needing to have 3 continents, guys. So here's the problem. This isn't like I'm saying no more international teams. There are no international teams that's like South American player, Asian player, Europeans. Like even an international team is going to be like Europeans plus 1 South American, Europeans plus a North American. These teams functionally don't exist except to abuse this loophole. And by the way, because people know you just have to have no majority, people are intentionally making rosters like this. Remember back in the day, there was a Hellraisers lineup that could do the same thing, where they had like Woxic and a few others. And I think theirs was like they had 2 CIS, 2 European, and 1, I don't know, Asia or something like that. I can't remember who they had. But anyway, they had a similar thing where they could pick. So to me, I'd just say this. If I was to close the loophole tomorrow and say, here's the rule, you just have to have 3 players from 1 region. I'm not really telling you have to be European now, because as far as I know, every other team except this team has 3 from 1 region. I'm only closing the loophole. I'm not actually stopping any functional real teams competing, as far as I can tell. So I feel like this loophole is so specific. It only ever seems to rear its head when someone's intentionally in bad faith abusing it to get an easier RMR. And then lastly, I'll just throw that last part out there. Look, if you want, we can in a second talk about the Richard part if you want. But to me, the worst part about all of this is where people just love Ori Pixel and hate Richard Lewis. Because what Richard's actually arguing for, guys, is what you guys say you want, which is regional qualifiers that celebrate regional talent. So how the fuck would someone going with 0 Asian players and qualifying from the Asian qualifier, which think about earlier in this convo, everyone does those convos. Wow, an event in Asia, will this spur people to play the game? Oh my God, people like Kays, they've been on the rise in the CS2, they get to go to a major. Well, all that's nothing if we just let everyone abuse these rules. In fact, I'll go one further. If you don't think these rules are bad, like you think it should still exist, and you think it's fine to exploit them, people actually are fucking up right now, mate. When you think how much sticker money there is, someone should really cynically make a roster with like JKS plus Keserato plus 3 European. Like you could then just go to the shitter star MR and instant qualify, get all the sticker money. But I think surely everyone could agree with me that would be a net negative for the space and the bloody Asian community. Like they don't get to have that team, do they? So to me, I do agree. This is like a storm in a teacup. It wasn't that big a deal, especially because they didn't qualify. But I do think it is essential we get rid of this loophole. Because like I said, I can't think of any time it's ever been legit used that wasn't like someone knew this rule and reverse engineered a roster that could just go anywhere. I don't get it.
I've got an angle that's going to accomplish like 2 things. One, it's going to bring up like a historical element. I know you appreciate that, Duncan. And it's also going to allow me to ingratiate myself with owners community so that I can, he can hire me as a streamer.
I know it's the whole show in many ways has been an advert for Anders to be hired as the caster of Ori Pixel stream in some ways. Yeah,
that's exactly right. So on the one hand, back when I think it was either the C-75 or the Krieg, but one of these 2 weapons at one point, like obviously at both different points in history, they've both been massively overpowered to the point where it was obvious in the community and for every pro player ever that these guns just had to change. And whenever we would meet at the majors with Valve, every player would step up and talk to Valve, and they would say, "Guys, what on earth is going on?" Like you can tell it's not a question of like let's look at the data. It's a question of like just look at the game and see that like it's obviously ridiculous, But Valve would always make this point and say, if it is that overpowered, then Because what the teams would do, and it is actually an interesting thing to think about. What the teams would do is they would make almost like a gentleman's agreement to use some of these guns. I think in the beginning with the Krieg, people were like, it almost is like uncool to use it. Obviously, at some point, like new players came along and they said, no, I'm going to be the Krieg person. But a lot of the like slightly older pros kind of like shied away from it because it was like an ungentlemanly, like it was too good. You know, like people were like, no, we don't want to use these. And what Valve pointed out is that if people don't almost exploit the game to the max, we can't necessarily tell.
Oh, they actually want you to do it, right? I see.
Yes,
right.
Like we actually want you to like. So if some weapon becomes like completely, just takes over the entire game, then in a couple of weeks, Valve will look at the data and they will say, well, obviously this is really like every single game. Like there was the one famous highlight is like the one tournament where like I think Olaf Meister had more Tech 9 kills than
it was kind of into 2015, yeah.
Yeah. So like. If something like that happens, right, then but if Olaf Meister is too kind and says like, well, I'm gonna be cool about it, I'm not gonna use it, then he's actually delaying the point in time where that happens. So Onapixel, all he really did was like, he showed us, he was gracious enough to show us that it looked like
he led the way. He's the Messiah in many ways. Yeah, true. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. That was my point.
He was the prophet that could see the future, Maui, and he understood that because of his prescience, he understood there was a greater tragedy coming in the future where someone would exploit these rules and get into a major. So what he did is he sacrificed his drillers, his main men, to not make it through this RMR, just to close up. It's like the end of Stranger Things. You had to like close the gap in the fucking rift or whatever. Yeah, to stop the evil shit.
In that case, we should just put his sticker in just as a remembrance of his testament that he's made. Wow. Yeah.
I think logically we should just put 1 pixel in the game. It should be a pistol. It's called the 1 pixel pistol. Kassad can do the artwork, and it's just the only pixel gun. There you go.
The concept of Kassad artwork.
And obviously the joke would be, I fucked up the joke, didn't I? The joke would be, it's available to both teams. In fact, all teams. You can just choose when to use it. In fact, even spectators can equip it. That would be just to make the scenario ridiculous like this. I don't like it. Whatever, anyway. Just all those coaches hiding in the heavens, watching us all from their secret camps. They can also have a gun too while they're doing it. Whatever.
Well, that was an Observer bug reference.
Observer bug, shout out to everyone who abused the Observer. Yeah, in many ways, actually all those coaches also who abused that Observer bug, they helped get that fixed. So in many ways, who was the real perpetrator? Weren't they actually the ones fixing the problem?
Thank you, Zoner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you to Zoner and Raging and Redonulus.
Ironically, I've created a moral loophole myself.
I know.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.